Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before I get to our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Samantha Lunn on the podcast. She's a natural figure pro coming to us all the way from Philly, close to Philly, I should say, how much I dread that, being a Minnesota sports fan that I am. But she's here to talk to us about her bodybuilding journey, but most importantly, she's our current guest. Samantha, thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Well, I got to ask first of all, because I asked this to every single guest, was the weather like in Philly today? Or near Philly?
It's a little bit cold for my liking, but it's about 40 degrees, so not too bad. We haven't had any snow yet, thank God. So that's the one thing that I'm excited about.
Well, I don't even want to show you an image of what my backyard is like because it's just completely covered. And so the high this coming Tuesday for us, where I am in Minnesota, is going to be 5 degrees.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be the high. So yeah, I'm really loving life now. I mean, it's just really just, it's tanning weather basically. So
Oh, exactly.
yeah. Okay. So, well, before I depress everyone with both of our winter woes, cause it's getting to be that time of year where, I mean, you just basically just want to curl up okay. We got a cute dog alert, everyone.
I can't
Oh
help it.
my God. Okay. What's the dog's name?
This is Duffy.
What kind of dog is he?
He is a Springer Spaniel.
Okay, we're gonna have a moment of appreciation because I love when we have dog. Okay, I'm like the biggest dog person you'll ever meet in your entire life. So, oh my God, that is so cute.
Yeah, hopefully he calms down.
Oh, that's fine. No, your dog would eat our dog for lunch. We have a little Cavachon, like a little 10-pound dog that she thinks that she's the toughest thing on the planet. But as soon as anything walks up near her, it's game over. So.
All bark, no bite.
All right, everyone. We just blessed this podcast with another great dog thing. I'm honestly thinking about making like a compilation of like every time there's been a dog on the podcast and just releasing that as a podcast in and of itself. I always say the best memory I ever had was that I had a guy bodybuilder on and he was talking to us and his cat, he had like his bodybuilding trophies up behind him and his cat jumped up on the trophy case and started kicking off his trophies.
Oh, that's a nightmare.
Well, I told him, I said, you realize that's staying in though, because like that's the greatest thing that's ever happened on the podcast. But,
yeah, that's great.
Well, we already had our day brightened because I was talking about how our winter woes were coming, so we already had the dog come on and make everything better. But why don't you give us a little bit of a backstory on what inspired and motivated you to get in shape and adapt this lifestyle?
Yeah, so when I graduated high school in 2015, I had been cheerleading all through, like competitive cheerleading, all through my childhood since I was probably like 9 years old. So that always kind of kept me in shape. I wasn't a big sports person, but I had that, so I'm always flipping around and lifting people in the air. And then I had an injury from cheerleading, so I had to kind of take a step back from that, and I wasn't really doing much for a little while. So then 2 years later, in 2017, I got a gym membership, and I thought, what better way to like fill my time than at the gym lifting weights. Pretty typical from there. I just kind of started following other health and fitness personalities on Instagram, stuff like that, watching a lot of YouTube videos. And I decided this time last year to start a prep for my first bodybuilding show. And from then it's history.
Well, I gotta ask, what position were you in cheerleading?
I was a base, so I held the flyers' feet, and I was picking them up the whole time.
I'm only asking this because my senior year of high school, our team won like the national championship or whatever they're at. They're like in Florida or someplace, and we couldn't hear enough of it. So yeah, that's how I got. Yeah, that's my cheer. But yeah, we actually had a really good cheerleading squad. So yeah, that's why I knew about all that. So yeah, that's awesome. So I mean, just getting started in the gym. I mean, another question that I love to start out with everyone, because it's so true, is that, I mean, if you're to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape, whether it comes down to, I mean, hundreds of things: diet, nutrition, how many reps they do. But I always say, if you're to walk up to someone and say, hey, what'd you train for this body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time is not going to work as good for you. What was that experience like for you, trying to figure out what worked best for your body?
So I feel like it's honestly still kind of a learning experience. I'm still pretty new, so I just started training the way that I train about a year ago, like I said. But honestly, just kind of taking bits and pieces from everyone. I always say, like, everyone has their own opinion and they're entitled to it. And you can always learn something from other people. So I'm lucky that I'm in a community where there's a very high concentration of people involved in bodybuilding. So I have a lot that I can pull from and learn from, and I'm lucky that a lot of people are willing to share their information with me and their experience and all that. So it's definitely been like a village kind of thing. It takes a village.
Oh, absolutely. And like I've always said, the community is just such a strong and tight knit community where, I mean, like, even if you look on any one of these people's Instagram pages, just all the compliments and all the stuff that they get from other competitors and stuff. I mean, it really is just such a close, tight knit community. But the one backside I will say to that, though, is that, like, everyone has, like we were talking about just like a minute ago, everyone has their own theory of how to get things done. So you basically have to become like a mad scientist, like I like to say, where you're concocting your own potion, where, I mean, it's so much trial and error. And I think, especially with our generation where everyone wants everything now and they want it yesterday, I mean, this is not the sport to get into if you have that mindset, because it takes so much time, dedication, and effort. And just like I always also talk about, like the whole Thomas Edison thing where he took like 1,600 tries to make a light bulb, and it took him that 1,601th try to do it. So it's just so much trial and error. But a question that I love to ask also, because genetics are just such a funny thing that a lot of people don't understand, that, I mean, everyone always has that one body part when they get started in the gym that really, really takes off. And then everyone always has that one body part that just lags behind, where they have to train it into oblivion to get it to catch up. I mean, I'll give you mine. My back, just because, I had warehouse jobs all throughout college. So you either got a really nice back or you quit. But also being 6'3", my legs and my lower body are just shot to absolute crap. Where, I mean, and don't even get me started on calves. That's my number one pet peeve, where it's like, I could inject pure muscle into my calves, and they wouldn't gain an ounce. But what were those body parts for you when you get started?
So still the same thing with me. My legs are definitely my weak point. My back is also my strong point for me. It just takes a lot of volume for my legs to grow. I also was dealing with a quad injury recently, so that kind of kept me back from training them really hard for a while. But yeah, it's just kind of hammering in the volume with the legs.
It's not even fair. Like, it's just like I've gone to gyms the other days, and then guys have been like, "Hey, Ryan, you plan on training legs anytime this year?" And then I'm like, "Dude, you saw me work legs yesterday." It's like, come on, dude. So yeah, you're just, yeah. I don't even want to get into it now because I'll start to get emotional on this podcast,
Right.
and that's just not
Yeah.
it's not a good thing. But yeah, it's just, yeah, it's a, I mean, and I find that question funny because, just the variety of answers that I get from that. But what would you say was probably the biggest nutritional change that you made ever since you really started getting the thick of things?
Yeah, so when I had first started lifting and everything, I was a big macro tracker, so I did the if it fits your macros, everything like that. And that's a big difference that I'm actually starting a prep now for a show in the spring. And that's the biggest thing that I would say that I've changed is I'm following a meal plan now instead of doing the if it fits your macros. Um, they're essentially on different levels like the same thing, but it's just more consistent, keeps digestion up and everything, and you just know exactly what's working and what's not working when you're on a meal plan, I found at least. So that's definitely been a game changer for me.
Have you started the prep yet?
Yeah, I'm about 3 weeks in now.
So how did you do with Thanksgiving, and how are you planning on dealing with Christmas?
Yeah, so those aren't holidays don't really exist in my world. Unfortunately, I still get to spend time with my family and hang out with everybody and enjoy all the like Christmas tree decorating and all that. But the food is it's kind of out of my mind at this point. So it's not too hard.
Well, you could always just do what I did, where the day before Thanksgiving, that day where everyone goes out to the bars and they go out and hang out with people. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be a full disclosure here on everyone. I had a little bit too much to drink, so I was not feeling the best on Thanksgiving. So I didn't get to eat anything at all. So, you could pull that way, I guess, but I guess the alcohol, you could find something else. But yeah, so I mean, either way, everyone out there, if you want to avoid family on Thanksgiving, just get really, really hammered, I guess, the day
Great.
before. But hey, it worked. But so anyway, yeah, it just going on prep through the holidays. I mean, we have so many guests that it's really half and half, I'd say, out of the guests that I have on, where half of them are like, yeah, I can't do it just because it's family. But then the other half are like, yeah, it's really not that hard. I mean, because yeah, if you're still there and you're still spending time with them, I don't think it would be too bad. But one of the training techniques that I've found that really, really works good for me, and it came from a lot of recommendations that I've had on this podcast, is time under tension. Do you do a lot of time under tension in your training?
Yep. So my coach programs my workouts like exactly down to a T and gives me like notes and everything to follow. And one of the big things is holding like pause in the like in the top of a movement, and then a lot of slow negatives mostly. So time under tension has been a big game changer for me, especially like coming into more of a bodybuilding type training from where I was doing more powerlifting before. It's really been helpful to kind of be more aware of the muscle group that I'm training and have that mind muscle connection, because if you're moving it slower, it's kind of inevitable to use it more, in my opinion.
No, absolutely, and that's one thing. I mean, I had never really focused that much on it until I really got into this podcast, and then I had so many guests say, "Oh, you should definitely try that," and I did, and it really does help. So anyone that's looking for maybe a new way to help with their training, I highly recommend that. But also, there are just so many myths and stereotypes that when it comes to this sport and when it comes to just a healthy and fit lifestyle. And I love to say, my number one pet peeve and my number one myth that I love to bust in this podcast is, it's always gotten better the last 5 years basically because of Instagram. But there are still so many women that have that fear that if they walk into the gym and they touch one weight, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. And, like I always say, I'd pay my entire life savings then to talk to you for 5 minutes because you have found the secret that me and 90% of the planet are looking for. Did you ever have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I mean, I bet you still hear that all the time. How do you like to respond to that?
Right. Yeah. So I get a lot of that actually. I get a lot of people on Instagram will message me and ask me like how I deal with that, or it's honestly just a confidence thing. If you enjoy lifting weights and you enjoy having like capped shoulders and like abs and whatever, abs are cool. That's kind of just like you have to get used to it. Once you're confident in yourself and in the things that you like to do and you're not trying to please other people, then it kind of all just goes out the window. Like you don't really care about getting too bulky, which honestly doesn't really happen too easily. It takes a lot more effort than I think people realize to put on muscle. But yeah, it's just all about being confident in yourself and what you're doing.
Well, and I just want to say this. I want to erase the word tone from the English dictionary because it's not even a real thing. That's not
Yeah.
even it's muscle. That's what tone. I mean, it's absolutely. And I think especially for women, they just don't realize that you don't have the testosterone naturally to even put on a significant amount of muscle without using enhancements. And that's a whole different thing too, where I think so many people look at these people on Instagram and they don't realize that's what they put in. And so yeah, that's a whole podcast that I'm just going to do separately all by myself and talk about that because it is just such a. I mean, I hear that so many times, and it's like, no, you don't realize what really goes on, and it's just, yeah. So that's a whole different thing. But I always say too, it's like, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You're going to get healthier. That's how I always like to respond to that. But going off that, I mean, I always say, I think the one thing that impacts women so much more positively than men is just that confidence boost that working out gives you too. I mean, on this podcast alone, we've heard hundreds of stories of women who have made that change and just that confidence boost and how it's impacted their lives. And I always say that's the one thing that you can take from the gym and use to impact your life in basically every single way. How have you taken that confidence boost and used that to impact your life?
Yeah, so I think that once I started lifting, my confidence just kind of did like a 180. Like through high school, I wasn't like down on myself ever, but like it definitely helped me come into the person that I am and realize that I'm a lot stronger than I thought I was, both physically and mentally. But especially going through the prep that I did for 22 weeks, it's not easy. Yeah, it's hard and it takes a lot of focus. And I kind of showed myself that I have a lot of qualities that I might not have realized without going through that, and having the perseverance and the dedication and everything. I kind of apply that to the rest of my life, like school and work and everything. I can kind of understand that if anything, I can do whatever I want, and I just got to make it happen.
22 weeks. Good God, everyone. That's like one of the most ones that we've had on the podcast. I think we had like a 20 week and then now 22. Yeah. So again, we hear new things but 22, how'd you get through that? Because I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. So I tried to go on a prep with a friend. I wasn't going to compete. I just wanted to do it in solidarity just to see what it was like. I lasted about 2 weeks and I was like, okay, yeah, I'm done. I just texted him one morning. I was like, I'll go to the gym with you, but there's no way in hell that I'm eating what you're eating. Like it's just not working for me. But after 22 weeks, I mean, was that just a huge mental battle? Because I mean, let's be honest, it was. But what was that like? 22 weeks on a prep.
Yeah, it's brutal. So that comes out to about 5.5 months. Honestly, the first half of it doesn't even really, well, at least the first time, because it was my first prep, I feel like it didn't even really feel real. Like it took me a good 2 months probably to get in the zone and like completely be into it. But once the wheels are turning, there's no stopping it. And like I just have tunnel vision. I just can't I don't focus on anything else. So it's just the goal and you do what you got to do to get there.
Yep. And I mean, we talked about this a little bit prior to the podcast starting, and I always say one of the things that's never talked about on Instagram that needs to be talked about because it is just so important. It is the most important thing I honestly believe is sleep. When it comes to your recovery, when it comes to just everything that has to do with bodybuilding, sleep. I mean, it is so important. And I always say one of my favorite guests that I ever had on was the number one sleep specialist on the planet. He called all the way from the UK in Oxford. And well, first off, one of the reasons why he was one of my favorites is because he had one of those British accents where you felt like you gained 10 IQ points just from talking to him. Like that was the upper, like it was like upper class posh British where you're just like, I don't even feel like I've done enough in my life to deserve to be able to talk to you like British accents where it's, I mean, I even told him, I was like, you're just going to talk the whole entire time and I'm just going to listen because like I don't want to ruin any of this. But yeah, we were talking about the importance of sleep and we had a little discussion before we started recording this podcast about that. And were there any tips and tricks that you would like to do in order to get that proper amount of sleep? Because you were talking about how some days, you're getting up at like 4 a.m. and, that's something that the vast majority of people would basically just tell you where to shove it if you wanted to try to get up at 4 o'clock. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm doing the same thing right now. The job that I work at requires I come in at 5 o'clock. So, yeah, so 40 minutes of cardio fasted before that is a little tough. But really it's just about like making sure that I'm kind of structured with my time, and time management is a big thing on prep. I just make sure that I go to bed when I need to make sure that I get enough sleep for the day, and that's all it is to it.
What time do you go to bed then if you're getting up that early?
Sometimes like 8 o'clock. So I've turned into a grandmom.
Well, I have a lot of teacher friends too, and that's about the. I mean, that's very similar. To that I mean, if you send them a text after like 9 o'clock, there's no way that you're ever getting anything back. So yeah, until at least the next morning. Yeah, I know that. So yeah, and that's that's. I mean, that's just again, it just shows the day. So what job do you have where you're getting up where you have to start at 5 a.m.?
So I work in retail, and we do like product placement.
What was Black Friday like for you?
Oh, a nightmare. Always a nightmare.
So I used to. So this is a job story that I haven't told on the podcast yet, but I was at UPS until about 2 months ago, and we had we started our what's called our peak season. Like right after Black Friday, and the first day after that, I had to bring a sleeping bag in and sleep underneath my desk because I worked 16 straight hours, and then I had to work 4 hours after that. So then I had to just go and get some sleep after that. But yeah, it is not a fun time. So anyone out there. I mean, I know this is going to come out because it already is past Black Friday, and by the time this comes out, it'll be still probably in peak season, but treat those people with respect that work in retail. I mean, because they're doing it. I mean, the job that they have is not a fun job to have, especially during this time of the year. If there's anything that I can say, and anyone out there, if you're ordering stuff online, just don't do that. Just go in and buy it. The people that work in the warehouses, they go through enough already. They don't need to send your crappy, your little kid Christmas presents or something like that. Just be a real person. Just be a real person about it and go and buy them in a store. But that's done with my online shopping rant, which basically destroyed, my life for about a good year and a half. But yeah. So when you're getting into this bodybuilding, I mean, I always say the one thing that shocked me more than anything else is that for a lot of these athletes, posing is the hardest thing for them. It's harder than their nutrition. It's harder than their working out. I would have never guessed it in a million years, but I love to compare it now to being like a perfect driver, where you can be a great driver. You can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser. You can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your experience with posing been like?
So mostly on my own. A lot of I've never had a posing coach, but I have like watched a lot of videos online. It's all about, in my opinion, like mimicking, finding what works best for you from other people. So a big one is obviously the Olympia current figure winner. She's won 3 or 4 times now. But her posing is, like you say, perfect posing doesn't exist, but I would agree to disagree.
We'll give her like a 9.99 out of 10.
Yeah. She's like the exception, but she just kind of shows that like every little thing matters, whether it's like your hands in a transition or like pausing at this certain second. Like it's just a lot. It's almost like you're dancing on stage.
Here's the thing though, like the thing that people get so anal about with posing though is that people don't realize, like me and you could say that she's perfect and she probably is, but a judge would be like, oh, she was like 1/10 of a centimeter off on her transition to quarter, and it's like, come on guys, it's like, really, you got to be that? But that's what they have to be. So that's why I love to make that analogy. But yeah, there are some people where I look at that and I was like, okay, that's as close to perfection as like a human could get, like unless they're like an actual robot, like there's no way that they can. But yeah, I mean, I just find that so fascinating, and that, I mean, all the time we've heard so many stories about how, after posing sessions, competitions, most of these competitors, you're more sore than you are after any of the workouts that you've ever done, just because the body is not meant to be in that much of a flex state for that long of a period. But out of your figure poses that you do, what would you say is your favorite pose and what is your least favorite pose?
Definitely the back pose, mostly because my back is my strong suit. But I just feel like it kind of, a lot of people say that shows are won from the back, and I completely agree with that because either your back is amazing and detailed and everything's there, or it's just kind of flat and lacking. So, definitely the back is my favorite. I think the front pose is probably my least favorite just because I feel like it's kind of boring. It's how I see it is it's the back pose from the front. So,
Well, I always said if I ever competed, the back would be my favorite too, just because, excuse me, that's the one pose where you can let your smile down and kind of just take a deep breath a little bit. I mean, I know one of the big problems that I've heard on this podcast too is that, you can't really let your smile down. Otherwise, we've had guests come on that talked about, they got downgraded a little bit just because they had their smile down for like even 15 seconds when they're doing the pose off with everyone or the final call outs. And it's just, I mean, I always said your jaw muscles are probably the most sore thing after one of these shows than anything else. But yeah, so that would be mine. But also, they got to make you guys wear those high heels, which I mean, it's like, don't you guys go through enough as it is just with the posing alone and everything else? What was your experience like in those heels?
so those the clear heels that I wear on stage are the only heels that I own. So it was a little bit of a struggle, still is. But yeah, that's probably the toughest part is walking around. I can do deadlifts and squats and anything until I fall over, but walking in heels is another another issue.
Well, and we hear so many stories like that too, where people just, you use them when you're vacuuming, you use them when you're doing everything in household just to be able to get used to that feeling, which I mean, I always said if you ever wanted to break the internet, make the guy bodybuilders go out on those high heels, and that would just to see what I mean, first of all, I would pay good money to see that because that would be hilarious to see. But yeah, again, everyone, I'm just coming out with great idea. Anyone who's, you can copyright that, whatever. I just want to see that happen and let me know, and I'll go to that show, and I'll bring a thing of popcorn with me for everyone else too in the audience. But yeah, I mean, it just adds on to the checklist of what especially the female bodybuilders have to go through. Because I mean, and that just goes with even like what you guys wear. I mean, like the guys, what do they have to wear, like a swimsuit trunk basically like that? And it's like come on. But another question, or I mean, another thing that I love to point out, because, and I mean, no offense by this, but you and me are both some of the most pale people that have ever walked this planet. Just because, and I'll admit it too, like my thick Norwegian skin, being in the upper Midwest too, where I mean, you're not going to get that much sunlight. I either say I just get burnt to an absolute crisp, or I get farmer's tan, where let's be honest, that's not a real tan. And so I've never been tan a day in my life, but bodybuilders get tan. So I always love to ask, what is that feeling like? I mean, I know the experience of getting the tan put on may not be the best, and believe me, we've gone into it on a couple of podcasts, and I was shocked to find out about that. But once you get that tan on, what is that feeling like when you see, we always hear these stories about muscles that you never even knew that you had. Everything really seems to pop out. What is that like for you?
Yeah, that's it. It's a crazy feeling, and especially going into it the first time, I kind of didn't know what to expect. But yeah, you stand there and they just spray you, and there's like nothing, nothing's off the table. But it's kind of like it's like the final touch that makes you kind of wake up and realize like this is it. Like I've worked my butt off for 22 weeks, and this is it. Like this is where it all comes down to. So it was really a cool feeling, kind of walking back into my hotel room and looking in the mirror and seeing like, okay, I'm really doing this. Like there's no turning back. This is it.
No, absolutely, and I mean, again, another the one negative with that, though, is that also you can't really sit on anything, you can't really lean up against anything. I mean, you just basically have to become like a human statue. Where, I mean, and again, just on the checklist of things that the bodybuilders have to go through before they get on that stage. Like we were talking about before, most people in the general public, when you talk about bodybuilding, they just think, oh, that's just the people that work out and then they go up on stage and they pose and that's it. They don't realize, 99.9% of the stuff that goes on outside of that, which makes up the vast majority of the experience of bodybuilding. But a question that I love to ask all my guests, whether they be, like my up and coming bands and musicians or my health and fitness and bodybuilding guests, for my bands, I always ask, what is that feeling like when you get to go up on stage and, perform live in front of hundreds to thousands of people? That also applies to the bodybuilders that I have on the show. What is that feeling like when you get to walk up on stage and show off all that hard work that you've worked months upon months to even years on?
Oh, it's awesome. It's an awesome feeling. And even thinking about it now, like it brings tears to my eyes, honestly, thinking about doing it again. The first time that I went up on stage, I was definitely nervous. I do have the experience of like the competitive cheerleading, being in front of a crowd and all of that, but there's nothing like it. You're walking up on on stage in front of hundreds of people, basically naked, and no matter how hard you worked or how sure you are of the prep that you had, like there's always a little bit of doubt in your mind. So you're kind of shaking a little bit when you go out, but once that adrenaline kicks in, it's like it's like you're a different person, and it's really awesome.
The one experience that I had that's very similar to that was that I was pitching in the state tournament when I was in high school, and literally walking out to the mound in between one of the innings, like my leg just started shaking. Like I think it was like the second to final inning, and I was literally just like punching my leg to like try to get it like stop shaking. And everyone thought that I was just trying to get myself pumped up, but I was like, oh no, I'm just trying to stop my leg. Like my leg was dead. Like I had a bruise on it the next day from like how many times I hit it, but hey, it worked. It stopped. And then my adrenaline kicked in. So yeah, I kind like on like a 1% thing, I understand what that's like. So yeah, it's I can't even imagine what that's like, being up on that stage. But when you're up on that stage, does time really seem to slow down, or does it seem to speed up, or is it sort of a mixture of both?
It's kind of, I think it would be like a mixture. Once you're up there, it feels like it's kind of like slow motion almost, like you're doing everything in slow motion. But then once you come off stage, it feels like it went by so fast, and you're like kind of in a whirlwind, like everything happened so quickly. But when you're up on stage, it definitely feels like, and they'll have you pose for a while. Some classes they'll have posing for like 15 minutes, so sometimes it's pretty long up there.
We've heard stories from one of the stories that I heard was from a lady who was 50 years old, and she was on there for like 45 minutes, and I was like, okay, get that woman a chair for God's sake. It's just,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, some of those stories that we have here are just unbearable to just even think about. But now we go to a fun question. What is your go-to post-show meal?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I had a burger for my first show. And it was not just a burger, it was a mac and cheese burger with sriracha. And I split that one. And then my friend got a breakfast burger on a waffle. So that was really good.
You
So
guys
that's
really know.
probably
You
the
guys really
first.
know how to eat. I'll give you props for
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I always said I would just take like $1,000 and I would just go to a Five Guys and just be like, "Hey, I'm buying you out for the day. Just feed me until I either puke, pass out, or throw up." But
They've
eat,
got
eat.
the best fries.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But now you're also a pro, so I always love to ask all the pros that I have on the podcast. What was that experience like when they called your name and you realized that you're a pro now? Because for anyone out there who's listening to this podcast who isn't really familiar with that, when you're a pro, you can compete in the pro shows. I mean, for a lot of these competitors, this is the highlight of their competitive journey. I mean, even if they go on to win Olympias, I've had some Olympia winners on, and then they still talk about, like when they first won that pro card, that's still the highlight, just because that's when they're like, oh my God, I can really do something with this. What was that experience like when they called your name and you're like, oh my God, I'm a pro now?
It was kind of disbelief, honestly. So I went pro my first show. I've actually only done one show.
So you're one of those people. Good God.
Yeah, overachiever. But yeah, it was kind of weird. I honestly, when I was called out, I didn't even really understand what that meant. So it's kind of been really cool to kind of watch it unfold and see like, wow, this means something. Like I really did that. It was really cool. When because how they do it is they'll call out fourth, third, second, and then they still hadn't called me for first. And I was looking around, I was like, I'm a pro now. Like this is pretty cool.
See, I understand why they do that, but it's like once you get to like the last two people, just announce the winner. You don't have to announce the second place person, because that's like I've seen that a few times where like I was just watching a video where they were doing like because I knew someone that was competing in the Miss Minnesota, and then like when they announced it, like literally they're like, and in second place so and so. It's like, I don't want to hear my name if I'm like in second place then or something like that. It's like, yeah, I don't understand it, but I mean, yeah, I can't imagine what that feeling must be like. I mean, it's just, yeah, to finally win in your first show. I mean, so you really, I mean, because we've had guests on here that have taken like 15 years to win their pro card, and so yeah, it really is a wide variety for that. But now another myth and stereotype that, I mean, is I love to bust, and I think it's because this is the one that could be the most harmful to people, is that a lot of people don't realize that look that you guys put on stage, that is not a sustainable look. You're not going to be able to look that way 24/7. I think a lot of it does with the fact that, I mean, there's shows like The Biggest Loser where people go on and lose a crap ton of weight and they're able to keep it off for a decent amount of time. So people look at stuff like that, and then they just assume with bodybuilding, where you guys work the same amount of, stress and, dedication as those people that are losing a ton of weight. They just assume, oh, you're able to keep that weight off then, just like everyone else when they're losing weight. But no, you guys have manipulated your body through all of the, the dieting and, maybe retaining water and just all the other tips all the other tricks that go into the sport. What was that like when you first realized that, like, hey, I am going to have to put on some weight after the show? Because so many people, that can lead to, a little depression, that can lead to just, some doubts, just realizing that, hey, I work my butt off, but unfortunately I am going to have to put on weight.
Yeah, it's a really hard time. A lot of people will tell you that the off season and reverse dieting is 10 times harder than the prep, and I completely believe that. Um, I did, like you said, it can lead to a lot of negative thoughts, especially coming from such a like a lean state and seeing yourself in the best shape that you've ever been in your life. It's really hard not to go into like a negative attitude about it. But you, like you said, it's not sustainable. It's not healthy, and the only way that you can grow, and it is bodybuilding. The sport is called bodybuilding. So the only way to grow is to my dog interrupting.
Oh my God. No, no, that's not a dog in a row. If anyone dislikes this video because of her dog, you are a horrible person. Okay. Oh my, okay. That's not, we might just have to have him on just for his own podcast later. So,
Yeah. But yeah, it was tough. And I'm sure it'll be tough the next time too. You just have to remember that it's what it takes to get better, and you have to put your health first above anything.
Well, and I always say it's like starting a business too, where you got to spend money to make money. You got to put on weight if you want to put on muscle. I mean, they just go hand in hand with it. But two questions that I especially love to ask all the bodybuilders that we have on. For the first one, I mean, there were so many positive things that happened to me when I started getting in shape and getting bigger and stronger. But the one negative thing is that you're going to get asked to move a lot of people's furniture. You're going to get asked to open a lot of pickle jars or bottled water or anything that's sealed on tight. I mean, I'm still at home with my parents for the next couple of months before I move out. And every single time that they come home with groceries, I basically have to lift the car into the driveway and carry it in for them.
Yeah.
What has that experience been like with you? Have you found that as you've gotten in shape, even more so from your prep, that people are asking you for favors?
Yeah, lots of people at work will like ask me to if there's something heavy that needs to come down or go up anywhere. That's, they'll call me, or like my family will do that too, or people will just crack jokes and stuff like, "Oh, if I knock something over, like, oh, you're too strong," something like that. But it's funny. I like to joke around with it.
Oh, I joke around with it too, but the only thing that sucks about it is that first of all, being a guy, it makes it even worse, but also being 6'3", I mean, I could have zero muscle at all and they'd be like, "Oh, tall guy." Like literally, I think right before I started talking to you, I don't know if it happened when I started, but I got text and I can see it on my phone right now, is that it's saying, "Hey, you want to come over this weekend and help me move because I'm moving some furniture around." And it's just like, oh my God, like it's never ending, but it's definitely something that, hey, I appreciate the fact that they think that I can do it, but yeah, it definitely took me some time to really get used to it, but yeah, it really is. I mean, it's very interesting, but also, I mean, this is my favorite question to ask because, I mean, I always say for guys, clothing options can be very, very limited for getting in shape. But for women, I mean, it is just opening up Pandora's box, where I always say if you have big, broad shoulders, dresses aren't your best friend. Jeans are another thing that we hear of all the time, because if you have a big lower body and a small waist, jeans are not made for that. And just so many other things with clothes. But what are some tips and tricks, or what are some ways that you try to get the best out of your wardrobe, knowing that you have a very limited wardrobe, especially when you're going on a prep like you are at right now?
Yeah, it's hard. Especially with the jeans. Like jeans are a no-go a lot of the time. I find that it's best to buy things that are stretchy and can fit in multiple sizes, because you have to put the weight on in the off season, and your clothes aren't going to fit in the prep if you don't like weigh the same or have the same sizes and everything. So a lot of leggings, definitely a lot of leggings, stretchy jeans, things that are like loose fitting in the off season, I guess. You just kind of have to know and work around what works best for you.
See, now I had the exact sort of opposite issue of a problem, because I had small legs but a big waist, so it was just, I mean, still even now with jeans, where I mean I've gotten them to catch up a little bit, but yeah, it's just, yeah, I mean, I always say, if anyone out there is coming out with clothing options for fit women, I mean, other than like yoga pants, something like that, which I mean we can say has probably been, I mean, whoever invented that is probably, living off an island somewhere, and just I can't even imagine what that guy's worth right now. But it's just, yeah, if anyone out there has anything to fix that, I mean, you'd be a millionaire just based on all the guests that I've had on my podcast that said that they would buy that clothing off of you. So definitely get on it. But now, if someone were to walk up to you and say, Samantha, I mean, I know you've only competed in one show, but if you could change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding or the bodybuilding lifestyle, and everyone would go along with it, what would it be?
Hmm. That's a good question. Honestly, probably most of the stigma around it. A lot of people just assume that you can't live a normal life if you're doing bodybuilding, or that if you're prepping. And that's cost me some friendships and some connections with people. Some people just don't really respect it or don't like it in their life, and that's I probably would say that's the biggest thing that I would change is the stigma of, oh, you're on prep, you can't do anything, you can't be a normal person.
I'll correct that. When they say you can't be a normal person, I'll say it becomes hard to be a normal person, but you can become a normal. You can be a normal person because, yeah, I mean, you definitely can. I mean, it's just like when people talk about, like if they don't have the willpower to work out, and it's like you really have enough time in your day if you really get down to the thick of things. Unless you're like the president, or unless you're someone like that super high level position where you're like literally everything is scheduled for you. Otherwise than that, like if I always say, no, I don't condone this, everyone, but if you were to like follow someone for like 24 hours in a day and just write down everything that they did, you'd be like, okay, you had like 3 hours of time basically in your day where you could have worked out if you would have put that together. Now, again, everyone, I do not recommend doing that. You didn't hear that from me, but I'm just saying hypothetically if that happened. But yeah, hypothetically, yeah, if that happened. But yeah, so and the same thing is with like if even if you are bodybuilding, you do have that time in there where if you wanted to really hang out, but again, when you're really tired and you're really dieted down, I do not blame you for wanting to just get some rest or just sit down and just eat food. I've tried that for 2 weeks, and after that, there's no way in hell that I was going out to a party that night. It's just, yeah. So I totally understand that. But now, if we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at when it comes to your bodybuilding journey? When it comes to just your overall life, what are some goals that you would like to have achieved if we were to talk a year from today?
That is a great question. So, in terms of like my bodybuilding career, I would have liked to win the show that I'm planning on doing. Hopefully, get an overall. Um, in terms of like my business, I'm working on building up my client base. So I would love to have a successful business with a large client base that I can help. My main goal is to help other people do what I do, basically. So get to that point, and still working on my education. So this time next year, I'd like to be a good, substantial chunk more into that, ideally.
Well, and that's awesome, and we wish you nothing but the best of luck in that. But I mean, I just find it so fascinating about all the myths and stereotypes that come into this sport. But what would you say is probably a myth that you had before getting into bodybuilding that got debunked as soon as you started?
um, Probably that I didn't have time for it, honestly. Like you said, everybody has 24 hours, and I thought because I was going to school and because I was working and that I had friends that, I couldn't really do it. I couldn't make the time to do all the cardio and the lifting and the meal prep and everything. But once you really care about it and you have that passion, there's nothing that can stop you, and you make the most of the hours that you do have.
I again, everyone does have 24 hours. I got to put an asterisk by it though, except for someone like Dwayne the Rock Johnson. How he's able to get all the stuff that he does and still get a workout. I mean, he's made a deal with the devil where he's got to be going on like 27, 28 hours. Where I don't know how that's possible, but yeah, everyone else other than Dwayne the Rock Johnson basically has the same 24 hours in a day. And I mean, you're absolutely right about that. But a question that I love to ask for everyone, whether they be bands or health and fitness as well, whenever someone's trying to get started in something new in their life, I mean, always taking that first step is the hardest thing I feel for so many people because it really just, after you take that first step, you can't really make that many excuses about like not wanting to do something, whether it comes to even like trying, if you want to become a musician, like going to that first guitar class or, just learning that first song. Stuff becomes so much easier after that. Or when it goes to losing weight, I mean, that first time you walk into the gym, I always say, once you take that step into the gym, it is very hard to not get a workout in without leaving that gym. So what advice do you like to try to give people who might maybe come up to you and say like, hey, I saw what you've been doing. And I mean, even if they don't even want to compete, it's just like, hey, I just want to lose a couple pounds. I want to get into better shape. What advice do you like to give people just to be able to get them started? Because so many people need that motivation just to get started.
Right. Yeah. So the biggest thing I would say is I always like to say small changes are big changes. Any small change that you make in your daily habits adds up to a big change overall. Even if it's just like one meal out of all the meals that you're eating a day, if you can make it something that's like higher in protein and a little bit like lower in fat, something like that, it adds up, and every little change that you make adds up to a big change overall and adds up to more little changes. So you got to start little to end big.
Oh, and I always say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, I've heard so many times of people who, when they get started, they just think, "Oh, I got to go and work out like 3 hours today, and I got to like everything's got to." It's like, dude, you're gonna last 2 days if you try that. Because I mean, I tried that when I was like 16, 17. It's like, no, it just doesn't work that way. So start out small. I mean, you don't have to go to the gym, and you don't have to be just crushing it from day one. I mean, you can start out, just get your body used to it. Because let's be honest, your body's gonna be sore as crap after the first. It takes, like people say, it usually takes about a month or two before your body really gets used to it, and you don't get as sore as you normally did. So yeah, just get used to that rep and repetition. But now, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
Sure, that's great. I'm gonna give a shout out to my best friends Lexi and Erin. They are two of the most essential people in my prep and my life overall. Helped me get here. Shout out to my coach Steve. Everybody at Attilas, Rock Bottom Nutrition. My parents are cool too.
They're cool. Yeah.
Yeah, my mom will probably watch this.
Yeah. Well, hey, we love. Yeah, I mean, yeah. That was my when I first started this podcast. That was like my main audience was moms of like the bands that I had on the health and fitness people.
Yeah.
But now that we've grown a substantial amount, it's gotten a little bit better in that department. But yeah, so I appreciate all the moms out there and all the moms and dads. But I mean, yeah, and it was, I mean, Samantha, it was so great having you on and sharing your journey. And yeah, I mean, like I said, we wish you nothing but the best of luck. And everyone, I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below, and everyone go and check that out. Now, granted, I got to give a little warning ahead of time. It will motivate you to get in shape and stop eating those Twinkies and get off the couch, just because you are going to be looking at some photos. Where you're going to be like, okay, yeah, I need to definitely get off the couch and start going on the treadmill. But yeah, and lastly, we talked about this. I mean, this is the last question, and I saved it for the end because it really is something that I think is really cool. But we touched base on it briefly in the very beginning of the podcast. Is that this bodybuilding community is so tight knit and so nice and positive to everyone? How important is that to you, especially because this lifestyle is such a mental lifestyle? Where I always say the physical aspect of it, where I mean, you can convince yourself to work out. But the mental aspect of getting up every morning and eating the same stuff, or getting those shakes in, and just it's just it tears people down a lot. But having that positive support from everyone, how much of a benefit is that for you, and how much does that help you get through those days, knowing that like you generally there's a community of people that really do care about you?
Yeah, that's definitely been like essential in from the beginning is having a supportive community. It really gets you through the hard days, and there's honestly there's a lot of hard days when you're on a prep, especially as long as the ones that I do. But having even just like Instagram or having a gym community locally is like a game changer. Someone, even just like one person that you can like message or text, that person is usually my friend Erin, who will just kind of, when I'm in a negative kind of thought spiral, she kind of pulls me out of it and reminds me why I'm doing what I'm doing and just keep going kind of. So I think community is like the number one important thing.
And for people that always ask me about why I started, interviewing bodybuilders, a lot of female bodybuilders, I've had a few male bodybuilders on here, is because the male bodybuilders, I mean, they'll rip your throat out. They don't give a shit really about like about like how good you are, about what your thought process is like. They really don't care. But like the female bodybuilders, I mean, it really is such a tight knit community where people generally do care about each other. So that's why I really enjoyed that. But again, Samantha, we cannot thank you and your dog enough for coming on the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. And again, we wish you nothing but the best of luck. And this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.